Welcome everyone to webinar number 2. Like I said, we're still experimenting with this format, so your feedback is always really welcome. Today we are talking about the ethics of touch, and this workshop is a very, very abbreviated, adapted version from one developed by Mary Harbour and Dave Hinsberger. This is the copy of it. I just want to let everybody know that the workshop, which comes in sort of a half-day interactive format, is something that we're available to offer for free during this round of funding for the My Life, My Body program. So if your agency is interested in having me come in and do a half-day or a couple-hour session specifically on this, specifically in your agency, that is available. And also the video and sort of facilitation guide is available at the YACL library. So if it's something that you want to take back and watch kind of the full 4-hour tape that Dave's got, then I highly recommend that as well. Those are sort of expanded resources for you today. So for those of you watching who may not be familiar, my name is Sophia Fortin, and I am the sexual health facilitator with the Yukon Association for Community Living. I run the My Life, My Body program, which is a healthy sexuality and healthy relationship program for the disability community. So we've been funded for a second year, and this year we're focusing a lot on awareness and education, so helping family, helping frontline staff, as well as individuals to understand more about what sexuality means, within the disability context, and how we can all be working to support healthy sexuality and healthy relationships for our clients in all their many forms. So when I say relationships, I'm talking everything from friendship, parent relationships to intimate sexual relationships. If you missed it, our first webinar, Sexuality in Everyday Life, is a really great primer and base for all the webinars that are coming, so I highly recommend watching it. It's available on the hsyukon.com website, and a video of this webinar will be available as well. So always there for you to access if you want a refresher. So today we are talking about the ethics of touch. What does that mean, Sophia? The long and short of it is the perspective that we're really talking about today, or where I'm coming from today, is that the true reality of it is that our clients, our family members, are very much at risk of being victims of abuse, or what I think of as unwitting perpetrators of abuse. And abuse really comes down to the word I'm trying to think of here, a situation where a person sort of breaks or crosses the personal boundaries of another person. So these can be very small, minor kind of infractions, and we see these every day in everyone's lives. Most of us are really bad at setting personal boundaries and maintaining those boundaries. We let people impede or sort of cross our personal boundaries all the time. And we often very unwittingly cross the boundaries of other people. So that can come sort of innocent questions around pregnancy, or the desire to touch pregnant ladies' bellies. That's a very common sort of violation of a person's personal boundaries. That's very sort of common and accepted in our society. And then of course we have sexualized assault, where someone very willingly and very consciously is crossing a person's personal boundary to get what it is that they're looking for and what they need. So in the context of our family members and clients with disabilities, because they're so at risk of experiencing sexual abuse, and also of perpetrating, not necessarily sexual abuse, but of breaking personal boundaries, we want to make sure that as caregivers and family members, we are thinking about what we are teaching and what we are modeling about personal boundaries, so that we're creating a strong foundation for our clients and family members to avoid that. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. I just want to be clear, I am going to be talking a little bit more from a frontline staff perspective, although I'll try to bake in some family considerations and pieces, but I'll be speaking mostly from the context of staff who are working in homes or in sort of frontline capacities with clients on a day-to-day basis. So essentially, when people don't understand privacy and when they don't understand personal boundaries, they are at risk of becoming victims of abuse or becoming perpetrators of abuse. And there are many, many reasons that our family and family members, and clients with disabilities have very distorted sense of personal boundaries, and that often has to do with the care that they receive um, and the ways that we are sort of unknowingly modeling touch for them, as well as affection that isn't always appropriate. So, in the case of clients or family members that are needing intimate care, this is a very extreme case where you have a person who's not really been able to experience physical privacy in any aspect of their life because there's always people helping them to be toileted or to shower or to deal with intimate care parts of their life. So their sense of privacy is very, very different than more typical folks or folks who are differently abled who don't need support in those areas. As well, for folks with disabilities, they often have sort of a distorted sense of personal boundary because people are just in their personal space all the time. So whether it's we're trying to get their attention, whether it's that we're trying to support them to get from place A to place B, we are often sort of unconsciously or unwittingly in their personal space, violating their personal space really, without checking in, without letting them know why we're there. And so just over time, there's this erosion of understanding of personal space and personal boundaries. So those are kind of some of the things that we're going to be exploring today. And I want to start with two stories that Dave shared, which I think really beautifully illustrate ways that what we model at home or in care can go awry for our clients when they're out in the community. So the first story is about a young man who went to go buy a watch. So this was a young man who lived in care fairly independently. And every day he would go to the store at the mall and look at this watch that he really, really wanted. He never had the money to buy it, so he would just go, stare at it, look at it, take it in, enjoy it. It gave him great pleasure to do that. And the staff learned to sort of ignore him. They knew that he didn't really have any cash to buy the gift, so they just sort of tolerated him being there, doing his thing, wasn't bothering any other customers. All fine. So his birthday comes, and he receives a card in the mail from some family members with just enough money to buy the watch. Oh my God, amazing day, right? So he hops on the bus, heads down to the mall. He's so excited. He's ready to buy this watch. And he gets there. Now, the staff at the store don't know that today this young man has money in his pocket. So they don't see him as a customer today. They see him as the same as they've seen him every other day that he's been at the store. This young man knows he is a customer today. So when he arrives, nobody really pays any attention. Nobody comes to greet him. Nobody comes to ask him if he needs anything because they just assume that he's there to look at the watch like he has been every other day. So this young man is looking to get someone's attention and tell them something extremely important. I just want you to pause for a second and think about, in any of the situations where you've been being with family members or clients, what do you do with a family member or client when you are looking to tell them something very important and get their attention? You can write in the chat if you want, or you can just think about what you might do physically. I'll give you a second to think about that. So pretty standard response is to put our hand on a person's shoulder, to turn them near us, to get quite close to their face and make direct eye contact and tell them what we're looking to share with them. It's really important that we X, Y, Z. So this young man is looking to get attention, and he's got a strategy. He knows how to get someone's attention and tell them something very important. So he sees a woman over in the corner stocking shelves. She's got her back to him. She's busy doing what she's doing. So he goes up to her. He puts his hand behind her silently without saying hello or anything to turn her around to face him. He's a very large, very tall guy. He pulls his face right into her to tell her, I'm very excited about buying this watch today. Do you think she heard a word he said? Probably not. In fact, what happened was she freaked out. A large young man with a disability had grabbed her arm, turned her around, and shoved his face in hers. She freaked out. She panicked. She didn't know how to respond. I think she started yelling. In order to calm her down, he grabbed her arms and he started shaking her. I'm not sure where he learned this practice. And in the process, his thumb ended up gently pressing up against her breast. Needless to say, the whole situation ended in disaster. A young man who left his home that morning, excited to buy a watch, came home having assaulted someone, having hurt someone, and now potentially being labeled a sort of sexual perpetrator or sexual harmer. All because we have this very small habit of teaching in a particular way, and this is what we have learned and then replicated out in. So this is one example of how we can start to think of or break down the really small sort of inane gestures of touch that we're doing with clients every day, and how they are supporting or not supporting the learning outcomes that we're really hoping to teach. The second story that I want to share is about a young woman and the bus. So she went through the process of learning her transportation independence. She got her bus route. She knew where to get on, where to get off. So eventually she starts taking the bus alone. And in Toronto, they have the same bus driver for the route. So she starts to develop a relationship with the bus driver. This is great. This is a win. She starts sitting up front, starts chatting casually with him every day. This is community inclusion. This is a person who has a relationship of some kind in her life that's not paid. He's openly interacting with her. It's all very positive. Turns out the bus driver is heading on vacation for a couple of weeks. He lets her know that he'll be bringing back a postcard for her. So she goes home. She's super excited. She marks the date down on her calendar. A couple weeks later, she's standing at the bus stop again, terribly excited. The gentleman's been gone for a couple of weeks, and she's got a postcard waiting for her. She gets on the bus. She steps out. She sees the postcard in his pocket, and then she bear hugs him. He freaks out, pushes her off, tells her to get away from him, go sit down over there, don't you ever do that again. We have a young woman now who's startled, confused, really not sure what's going on, and the worst of it was the next day she got on the bus, and the bus driver had chosen to change routes. So in this case, we had a young woman who equated giving affection with giving touch. So she hadn't learned other ways, verbal ways in this particular case for her, which would have been supported, to share her appreciation and her affection with the bus driver. So she'd been able to get on the bus and say, I missed you, it's so wonderful to see you. I'm so excited to see my postcard. That interaction would have gone very differently, and this bus driver would have continued to have a very different perception of individuals with disabilities and inclusion in the community. Instead, he left with a very negative assumption. And mostly the reason he reacted, Dave was able to speak with him later, was because he was afraid people were going to think that he was assaulting her. So what's interesting in this context is, in the story of the watch, we have a male client with a female clerk. And in the story of the bus, we have a female client and a male bus driver. But in both cases, the person with the disability broke a boundary. They violated a boundary. They hurt another person. They are not the victims in this scenario. The store clerk and the bus driver are the victims in this scenario. Very unfortunately. And this is why thinking about the ethics of touch and thinking about our day-to-day interactions with clients is so critical. I'm just going to stop there for a moment. Are there any questions about that or anything that's sort of coming to you right now that you want to chat about? You can just post it in the chat. I'll just go over the agenda as you think about that. So today, I'm just going to talk very briefly about privacy aspects of it, because I know we don't have that much time, and I really want to get into affection, relationships, and our role as client frontline staff, making the transition. So if we're having some light bulb moments that we want to start to change some of the ways that we're interacting with clients, how we transition to a new way of interacting with clients, as well as client-focused outcomes. So thinking about what are the things we really want our clients to be taking away from the touch and the affection they're receiving from us, and how do we kind of come up with creative strategies for making sure that those outcomes are being reached, as well as some resources. So you can interrupt any time with the questions. We talked about our 2 stories. Or email me anytime, Sophia@ycommunityliving.com, if you have a question or a comment that you'd like to share privately. So, privacy. I just want to talk quickly about 4 kind of key things about privacy within the context of folks with intellectual disabilities. And the first is that privacy is learned. So we kind of have this sense that it's a very innate internal thing. And in many ways, in a neurotypical brain, it can be. So we all, for the most part, tend to go through a developmental phase around 4, 5, 6, where we start to develop a sense of modesty. So if you've ever had children, you'll notice generally there's a phase where they start closing the door when they're getting dressed. They start asking for privacy when they're in the bath or when they're going to the bathroom. So there's just kind of a time in a typical child's life with a little click. And that sense of body modesty, that sense of personal privacy starts to gently kick in. In the brains of folks with intellectual disabilities, this is often not the case. And so when we're dealing with parents of younger folks with intellectual disabilities, this is something we need to start to teach at the same time as their peers are starting to experience it. So privacy is a learned skill. And it's a learned skill because we basically pick up cues about privacy from the environment that we grow up in and that we're in. So if we have clients, and we're kind of out of the days of sort of institutions, but as an example, if we think about a man who spent most of his life in an institution, in a bedroom with 30 other men, changing, getting ready to go for his day, getting ready to go to sleep in front of 30 other people, and showering in front of 30 other people, and potentially bathing or going to the washroom in front of staff, then this person is learning very different rules about privacy than me in my private home, where the bathroom door is always closed when people are in the washroom, and we learn to knock before we interrupt. So privacy is very much a learned skill, and it's learned from the environment that we are in and how body privacy and other privacy is modeled to us. So in some homes, we're less modest than others, and family culture is definitely an important aspect of all of this. The important piece here is that privacy is learned, and we can't make assumptions about what our clients have learned about privacy. We need to really reflect on their histories, where they've lived, how they've been raised, and what they might have learned about privacy along the way. Just taking my notes. So the second piece is that invasions of privacy can be extremely subtle. So just a quick note here that essentially when we're in human services, when we're in frontline care, and this also applies to like doctors, nurses, anyone who's working in a hospital, it's very easy to become quite desensitized to the private environment that we are working in. So if we take a hospital context, I can't tell you how many friends share horror stories of being told very intimate and private news in sort of a super casual way, or experiencing a situation where they're on an examination table, their doctor's looking at them, and just super casually calls in 4 or 5 other people to come examine what is going on here because it's super fascinating. So in that moment, those doctors have lost their sense of privacy and modesty because they're looking at these body parts, these naked bodies all day, and they've forgotten what it means to be on the other side of the table and what it means to be in a very private situation. So this can apply a lot more sort of in the realm of intimate care. So if we're bathing a client very regularly, very easy to just get too comfortable and too casual with it. And we just have to be very aware that when we're getting comfortable and casual with it, we're allowing those really strong boundaries to erode, and then we're changing what we're teaching to our clients. Another way that we sort of tend to invade client privacy regularly is in how we talk about them and how we talk about very private things. So Dave always shares a story about how there was a big, multi-staff agency meeting about a young woman, and she was there, and everyone was speaking very comfortably and very openly about her menstruation care right in front of her. And Dave sort of raised his hand and said, I don't know how comfortable I am with this. And the response from around the table was, well, she doesn't care, so it's not a big deal. And the point is that she should care, right? Most typical 18-year-old would not be comfortable sitting at a table with 6 other people who are just openly and casually discussing her menstruation needs and care needs. So thinking about the very subtle ways that we can invade privacy, the way our homes and care facilities are set up. Do people actually have spaces to be privately bathing, to be taking a 5-minute privacy break in the day? How are we supporting or invading people's privacy? And where have we become almost too desensitized to that? So just really important questions to reflect on. The other piece is that privacy is a mental health issue. It's not a sex issue. So a lack of privacy can really affect our mental health. And the most clear example I can think of this is how many times a day any or all of us that are here take a moment to step out for a walk or go to the bathroom and take a deep breath, or essentially take what would be called a privacy break, because we need to just step away from the world and get a few minutes alone, take our breath, or just be away from the folks who are around us. This is very common. It's a basic human need to need alone time, to need private time, have spaces to do that. We don't question it when we need it, but we can question it sometimes when our clients need it, and we can forget that our clients have the same need for privacy in terms of their mental health as we do. And so that's something that, again, we just want to be thinking about and questioning when we're working with our clients. Finally, privacy is a social skill. So it's something that we learn in relationship to other people. And basically this relates to kind of the next, the rest of the presentation today, which is that our clients are learning about privacy and personal boundaries from us. They're learning it in relationship to us. So we need to be asking ourselves, what are we teaching them? We go back to the watch story or the bus story. What are we teaching our clients when we're pulling them in close to tell them something important? Or when we're bear hugging them every time something really great happens? Or when we're always touching them as a way to show affection, to show that we care, rather than using our words or using other means to share how important they might be to us today, or how appreciative we are of something that they might have done. So privacy is one of the foundations of appropriate touch and interacting with others. And like I said, learning to create sort of a modesty bubble, or understanding that we have a personal bubble and a personal sense of privacy. So I'm not talking about shame. I'm just talking about privacy about our body. Is extremely important when we're talking about abuse prevention. So we want our clients, we want our family members to think it's strange if too many people are seeing them naked. Lots of people seeing them naked should make them feel uncomfortable. We want them to be thinking about the times where they need privacy. We want them to be thinking about, it should feel strange if too many people are hugging them, or if people they don't know well are hugging them. And we often have kind of the opposite effect, where the folks in our lives are over-hugging others because people are hugging them. So privacy is critical, and understanding that sort of personal modesty around our bodies is kind of one of the foundations that we start with. All right. Any questions about those pieces before I move on? Just kind of give me like a thumbs up, or we're all good in the chat. That's always helpful. Okay. So relationships, affection, and our role. So as we talked about in the last webinar, some of you there, some of you weren't there, we talked about how intimacy and affection are critical elements of human happiness and well-being. So they're really important aspects of our lives. We all need to be seen, respected, and loved by our peers, by our family, and others in our life. We all need physical touch to some degree. We all need affection. We all need to feel appreciated. And we all need emotional support and care, whether we're going through a time of grief or disappointment. We're all needing those supports. It's a fundamental human need that folks with disabilities share with the rest of us. So the question I kind of have for you today, though, is who should be meeting the affection needs of clients or family members? And when I say affection, I also mean sort of appreciation and intimacy. And I don't, again, necessarily mean sexual intimacy or sexual affection. I just mean having someone tell you you did a great job, or having someone say thank you for something nice that you did today, as well as having someone make you feel emotionally supported when you're having a bad day. So who should be meeting the affection needs of our clients and our family members? And how do we make sure that those needs are met in a way that doesn't teach unsafe boundaries or create opportunities for victimization? Those are some of the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. And at this point, I generally invite everyone to just pause. You can take a piece of paper if you want, or just kind of make a mental note. And think of a few of the clients that are in your life or family member, if you're a family member person. And think about how many people in the lives of your client or family member are unpaid people. So put another way, if you were to think of all the folks that you, if you pick one client or one family member, think of all the folks in this person's life who might be considered their friends or who they might sort of have affectionate relationships with. And then cross off of that list someone who's paid to be in that position. Doesn't mean they care any less, but they are paid to be there. Just reflect on that for a minute. How long is that list for your client or your family member? So I'm willing to bet that it's not very long, or it's not as long as it could be. And this can vary from person to person, but we do know that folks with intellectual disabilities live predominantly lonely lives and isolated lives. They really struggle with creating meaningful friendships and relationships outside of paid staff. And part of the reason for that, or part of the question that we have to ask ourselves is, why aren't people seeking that, right? So they might not be seeking it because they don't know how. They don't have the skills, they don't have the opportunities. But in part, it is because as frontline staff, we have become habituated to or used to providing these things for our clients, whether it's our role or not. And this becomes the question. So whether staff should be meeting the emotional needs and affection needs of clients. And that's where we're going to talk about the rules of affection and setting boundaries. So the question really is it problematic that staff are meeting the emotional needs and the affection needs of clients? Is that a problematic thing? And why might it be problematic? So in the lens, again, that we're talking about here, and again, I want to clarify that I'm not talking about being frontline staff that are cold or mechanical in our service provision. I'm not talking about not ever providing any affection or any emotional support. That's not realistic, and that's not how we provide good care. However, we do need to ask ourselves if we're the only people in someone's life providing this support. What are we teaching, again, and what are we setting them up for? And again, how are we making sure that we're setting good guidelines that are protecting folks from becoming victims of abuse or perpetrators of abuse? So the more affection we are providing as a staff person, right? With family, it's a little bit different. The more affection and sort of emotional support we're providing as a staff person, the more likely it is that we have blurred boundaries that are going to be counter to the things that we want to teach to our clients. So we need to think about ways that we can provide support and provide an affection and also meet our learning outcomes of our clients and not erode the personal boundaries. Is that making sense? It's a tough question for folks. A lot of reactions can really come up when Dave does these presentations, for sure, and I've seen them. And again, it's just to think about the nuance, right? To think about the nuance of if we go too far down the path of meeting those needs, when we don't do it in a way where we're focused on what we're hoping our clients will learn, it's very easy for us to accidentally or inadvertently be teaching the wrong lessons and setting up our clients to be, again, abused or frustrated. The other thing that we kind of forget in all this, and I'll mention it a little bit later as well, is that as staff, our boundaries matter too. So we need to feel safe at work. We need to feel safe that from false accusation of touch, of inappropriate touch. And our boundaries matter too. If I'm not a hugger, I should not be automatically expected to be tolerating or enduring hugs from all of my clients who are super huggy. Work needs to be a safe space for me as much as it needs to be a safe space for clients. And so when we're talking about setting boundaries, we're talking about setting boundaries for ourselves as much as we are for our clients. And that's a really important distinction. Don't want to forget. I know for me, when I first got into this, I was quite taken aback by the sort of physical connection from many clients. And in the beginning, it was a lot easier to sort of maintain my distance and to say, well, like, I'm a new crew in your life, I'm a stranger. And then over time, it became much more challenging for me to maintain and assert my boundaries and to stay true to kind of the values even that I had there. And it was very interesting to watch this sort of like internal tug of war that happens. And that's really the piece that I guess I want to emphasize a lot here is we often struggle with this concept of setting boundaries with clients because we struggle with the concept of setting boundaries in our life, period. Most of us do. Most of us endure transgressions of personal boundaries all of the time. And we just write it off or, whatever, it's not a big deal. But when we are allowing transgressions of personal boundaries with clients, it comes with very different ramifications and very different impacts because it's all leading to us modeling the way we want to be interacted with and the way people should be correctly interacting in the world. So a lot of the discomfort can come here from our own personal challenges with setting boundaries and our own personal discomfort around that. And the number one thing that we're all worried about is hurting someone else when we set our boundaries. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we go. So the rules of affection and setting boundaries. Basically, the rules of affection can guide our personal practice, as we want to think of it, in the workplace. And they can create a personal value or like boundary system for us that is consistent with every client that we serve. So it's really about sort of creating rules for yourself that create a consistency and professionalism in your care that you use regardless of the workplace that you're in and regardless of the client or the family that you're interacting with. Because it's about you maintaining an ethic of teaching positive learning outcomes and modeling positive learning outcomes around boundary setting for clients. So like I just talked about, I just had some notes there about knowing our own personal journeys there. People really like boundaries. The reason that we like boundaries is that they provide clarity. They set clear expectations. They get rid of ambiguity. And these are all things that our clients struggle with. So where we have the most challenges is when we've had a workplace culture that's been a little bit too affectionate or hasn't quite, we haven't taken into consideration the ethics of touch. Scaling that back and transitioning back from that is much more challenging than inviting new clients into an organization where from day one, staff are not friends, staff are staff. And boundaries are clearly set, and clients know exactly where they stand, exactly what the rules are, and because there's clarity there. People like boundaries. In the sexual education that I do with neurotypical adults when I'm working with couples, sexual communication, boundary setting in communication is huge, and it provides clarity about the sandbox that we're going to play in and what is going to make everyone feel comfortable. And when we have that clarity, we can all relax and just have fun together now that we know what the rules are. So people like boundaries, and learning how to set them and be clear and consistent with them is a huge part of our practice in working with clients professionally. So what are these rules of affection? There's not too many, and in general, this can all be summarized into one big rule that Dave has, which is no client should ever be full-on, bear-hugging, frontal, full-body hugging a staff. We should never, ever be touching the client. That's a very intimate form of touch that is violating both our personal space and their personal space and not setting a good precedent for any kind of touch that is safe. It's basically teaching them that they have no personal bubble or boundary, and neither do we, and that can be infringed upon at any time. So the general rule of thumb in that is just remembering no frontal bear hugs. So what that means is, if we're going to be showing affection to a client, if we're going to be showing appreciation to a client, if we're going to be touching the client because we feel like they need a pick-me-up today because they're a little bit disappointed about something that didn't work out, or, we want to celebrate with them the, special O medal that they got or whatever, we want to make sure that the affection is brief, so it's not a prolonged hug, very short hug, side by side always. Your hand never goes under the arm of another person, so we're not coming around. I demonstrate this on myself. Coming around the other person and sliding the hand under the arm, that the hand stays on the shoulder or the upper arm. In general, as much as possible, that the affection is happening in a public place. So that might mean that there's just the two of you, but you're in the kitchen or the living room or like a public space in the office, that you're not in the bathroom or somewhere more private, or that other people are around. Other people being around is really great. And one of the most important pieces is that the touch is contextual. And when I say contextual, what I mean is that you narrate why you are giving this hug, why you are giving this touch while you are doing it. So you are providing a learning in a teaching moment. You're providing context for the client about your motivations, about what's happening, and about why it's happening. So an example of this might be that you give a client a side hug after they've returned home from holidays, and while you're doing it, you say, "It's so nice to see you after having been away for a long time. I'm going to give you a hug to celebrate that you're back." So in this case, you've asked for permission to do the touch, and you clarified why you're doing it. Another case might be that you give a client a side-by-side hug at the kitchen sink, right? And you say, "This is a hug for you being so helpful today. I really appreciated all the work that you did." So again, you're sharing a verbal appreciation, but you're providing context for why the touch is happening. Now, that could be in the case of a side-by-side hug or in the case of a high five, right? So context is really critical. And the reason that we want touch to be contextual is because it creates a teaching moment where we're showcasing the circumstances of appropriate touch. So why we give hugs and when we give hugs. We identify what's happening to the client. We help them to understand our motives. And we protect staff from accusation. So perfect example of misunderstanding of motives I had just the other day. I was meeting with a client, and I had provided them with one of our books, our Down syndrome sexuality books, for this person to read. And this person came back to my office 2 weeks later with it, and I had written on the inside of this book my name and phone number, as one does in case a book gets lost and we hope it may return to us. And as this person came into my office, they asked me about why I had left my number in the book and whether it had been a wink, wink, nudge, nudge, hey, hey, call me kind of note. So there was a total misunderstanding of why my phone number was in the book and what I had meant by it. And thankfully, she asked me about it, and so we were able to have a moment of clarity where I was able to explain that I have my phone number in all my books so that if they get lost, they can make it back to me. And this was able to clear things up for her. But often our clients can misunderstand our motivations, and they can apply those motivations, those kind of incorrect motivations, to situations of touch or affection outside of their relationship with us and misapply them. So when we use those moments to be clear, to narrate what's going on, and to help them understand our motives and what's happening, we help them to learn about when touch is appropriate and what touch is appropriate. And it also protects us from accusation. So if I'm standing at the kitchen sink and I'm hugging my client and I'm narrating out loud what's happening and my supervisor is watching me do this, then everyone around me knows what's going on. There's clarity about what's happening, and there's clarity about the boundaries, which protects me from any false accusation. Any questions about the rules of touch or making touch contextual? I know that can be a lot to take in. So Dave always sort of emphasizes we're not talking about not touching our clients. We're not talking about not appreciating our clients. I'm just checking my email quickly here to see if anybody's written. We're not talking about being cold and mechanical, but we are talking about not bear hugging. So making sure that our touch is brief, contextual, always side by side. And then we're thinking about the learning outcome of our clients, so what we're wanting our clients to take in. That's what we're going to talk about next year, which is the client lesson. So what are we hoping that our clients will kind of take away from the touch that they're receiving when they're in our care? So the first real important lesson is that staff are staff. They're not friends. And in particular, in relation to the second piece, new staff are strangers. So this kind of relates a little bit more to situations of intimate care where if a person is new to an agency, and this is like crazy that this kind of thing would happen, but we know we talk about how turnover can be high, especially down south, is that we often give a new staff person who's not even through their probation period complete access to somebody's naked body to be doing intimate care for them. And that shouldn't really be happening, because what we want our clients to learn is that people who know me more touch me more, and people who touch me less know me less. Sorry, I typed this up quite quickly today, so that's not well written. I'll fix it for later. But people who touch me more know me more. So staff who have been with the agency for a long time or a longer time are the ones who bathe me, are the ones who touch more, are the ones who share more affection with me, because we have built up a relationship. But new staff are strangers. And if we're talking about a setting where we have a new staff, then let's just be clear from the beginning. Let's set those expectations. Let's clarify that role. I'm a new staff. I'm a stranger. I don't know you very well. It's okay to say that. And Dave would say that new staff, the newer you are to a person, the less you should be touching them. So if you're new to an agency and you're new to a client, then you shouldn't really be doing more than high-fiving and handshaking or like smiling and waving for at least the first 6 months that you're interacting with this person. And as you build a relationship over time and they demonstrate that they're comfortable with you, then you might transition into a shoulder touch or a side-by-side hug or more affectionate touch. But again, only as time has passed and you're able to demonstrate new staff are strangers, people who know me better touch me more. The other lesson that we want folks to take away is that affection does not have to equal touch. So there are many ways that we can share affection without touching people. And Dave always shares an example of like when you're driving down the road and you see a friend that's in the other lane. I mean, do you jump out and like jump through your window to go and like them a hug? No, you're able to just wave, nod, say hi. You can send them a text message. He often talks about, and again, this is a little bit verbally dominated, but if you have a client who's coming in for a hug because they haven't seen you for a while, and you might say, you know what, you don't always have to hug me when you want to tell me how great it is to see me. You can just say, hey, Dave, it's really great to see you today. And I really appreciate hearing those words sometimes more than I appreciate the hug. So we can teach our clients other ways of showing affection. We'll go back to the story of the young woman on the bus. She didn't have another way of sharing with this man how appreciative she was of the postcard and of his return. And if she had learned verbal strategies, of which I understand she was capable, to share her appreciation with this person, she would have been able to interact much more appropriately and avoid the drama that ensued, essentially. And then the last piece that we're thinking about is, yes, Ray, that's a great question, and I'll get to it in a second here. Context, 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 right? So making sure that clients are understanding when and how and who we touch because we're narrating and supporting them. So, yes, for those who are isolated and seek touch, the big thing is in this, and I guess this gets a little bit back to transitioning, Often our clients are seeking touch from us because they are isolated. They have no one else. And a big question we need to ask ourselves is why they have no one else. So if there are ways that we can broaden a person's social circle and provide ways for them to experience more healthy touch via friendships that are mutually supporting, that's really excellent. Other examples that Dave gives for folks who might be more severely disabled is definitely not underestimating the amount of intimacy and affection that pets can share and how we can meet our needs for feeling loved and affection from pets that we know. So there's examples of agencies that have, family care dog, and these dogs know how to go and connect with clients, give them affection, make them feel loved. And the other piece there, again, in terms of depending on the level of ability, also a very interesting example is the idea of mutual grooming. So one of the huge ways that mammals of all kinds share affection is to groom each other. And it's not something that we really do anymore, or we really relegate to sort of private relationships. But this is something that if we have two clients who kind of shown an interest in each other, shown a familiarity with each other, in the home, Dave shared an example of two clients who just kind of showed a preference of sitting next to each other and being around one another. And they encouraged mutual hair brushing. So he brushes her hair and she brushes his. There's nothing sexual about it, but these two people are able to touch one another, to give each other sort of that intimacy and that affection to fill that cup, so to speak, so that so that staff are not having to meet that need. So a lot of this comes down to trying to broaden our thinking so that we go back to what are the lessons that we're trying to teach. Always remembering that this is about making sure that clients understand what their personal boundaries are, so when they experience transgressions, they can report them, and so that they are less likely to transgress upon others. But also, if we are not providing that affection because it's not supporting our learning outcomes, to do so, how else can we provide affection and intimacy in our clients? How can we broaden the social network? How can we give them more opportunities to connect with friends, with others that they can touch in a healthy and appropriate way? How do we connect them with pets or others where they get the pleasure of affection and intimacy with in a healthy context? I hope that's helping a little bit, Ray. It often ends up being very specific, and so that's where we have to kind of put our creative thinking hats on and really just stay grounded in the learning outcomes that we're going for, to notice all of the ways that we're maybe veering from those and teaching other things, if that makes sense. So in terms of transitioning, I've got 8 minutes left. So maybe there's some light bulbs that have gone off for you. It's very, very common, and I don't want anyone here to think that they're doing a horrible job. Oh my God, I'm touching too many people. It's a really hard thing to do. I have struggled with it personally. I have watched myself give hugs that I didn't necessarily want to give, or I didn't think were good to give, but I gave them anyways because it was hard to circumvent my personal discomfort in that moment. It's a challenging thing to do, so I'm not denying that. We are not bad people, right? Setting boundaries is challenging. It's a habit. It's a habit most of us do not have. And it's interesting to me that we sort of demand, or we spend a lot of time trying to teach healthy boundaries to clients, even though we live in a world where they're rarely going to see healthy touch and healthy boundaries modeled, not only in our care facilities, but like out and about in the world. They're not seeing examples of what it is that we're asking them to do. And that is the struggle. And the real struggle is that the consequences for them are so much higher than they are for us when they don't get it right, so to say. So transitioning. So first thing, of course, is we're not going to go cold turkey. So if we've got a client who's a hugger and we've been in the habit of hugging them, we're going to start by avoiding the hug or taking a pass on the hug 1 time out of 3, right? So 1 time out of 3, we're going to try to opt for a high five or a side hug instead of a full hug. Then we're going to transition slowly to 2 times out of 3, 3 times out of 3. What's really interesting, Dave has shared in these transition plans, is that once we've got people transitioned, they don't necessarily slip back. And so, again, this is kind of in his experience, but what he's noticed is when you've got someone transition and then a new staff person comes and that new staff person gets huggy with them, if they've been transitioned off the hugs, it's more than likely that this person's going to go, that new staff person's been hugging me. I don't like that, which is exactly what we want. We want people reporting transgressions of personal boundaries. The other thing to remember is that this is a transition for you too, right? So as I've reiterated, we all struggle with setting personal boundaries, and it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel weird. We need to take the lead. So just being okay with that, being compassionate with yourself, and just taking the time to notice and observe, right? Noticing and observing are some of the most powerful things that we can do in our care. And the third piece really is, as a motivator for you, as something to think about, that your safety and comfort are just as important as theirs. Your boundaries matter. So if you're hugging clients when you don't want to be hugging, clients don't need our sympathy. That's not helpful for them. And when we are hugging them out of sympathy and not because we want to, we're setting a negative precedent, right? And this can be a particular challenge when we have individuals who are living independently in the community. So I've got a client who lives independently in the community, and we've become aware of, this client met a new person in the building, and they started hugging this person. Now, this new person, she's a stranger. It's very likely she's not interested full on bear hugs from a random individual in her building. But she's likely, in order to be nice, just going through with the hug. Now, unfortunately, she's setting a precedent for us, which goes against the lessons that we want to be sharing. So if we know about this, then I would certainly say we need to be approaching this person to say, hey, we need you to turn down the hug and offer a high five or something. And if we're out as job coaches or if we're out with clients in social situations and we notice them going for a hug with others, what we don't want to do is intervene and say, don't hug that person, because the lesson is, oh, when Sophie's around, I'm not allowed to hug other people. What we want to do is look to the person who's about to be hugged and say, I need you to turn this hug down. I need you to set that boundary so that this person learns. Now, of course, they're going to feel rejection. Totally normal feeling. It's totally allowed. Part of the learning and growing process. And ideally, we're not getting to a point where we're isolating them from all touch, because we're trying to find other means of making sure that they're receiving that positive affection and that positive touch. But transition is really important. And making sure that we're not going to work tolerating hugs all day that we really don't want, that make us feel comfortable, because that's not good for our own mental health, good for our job satisfaction, and good for our care, right? And one of the biggest motivators for me is, I'm tolerating the hug because the discomfort of saying something's too hard for me. Making them feel bad makes me feel uncomfortable. But if I remember that when I'm tolerating this hug, I'm setting a precedent. I'm setting a precedent that I may be a safe staff person, but the next staff person after me may not be. Then that can be a good motivator that my kindness is harming instead of helping. And that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So a few more minutes. I'm not really sure what happened with this slide. I tried to fix it a few times and all the words ran them together, but the things that I'd really like you to take away from today are basically every time we provide unregulated access to the body of a person with a disability, we are setting them up to be victims or perpetrators. And so that can be in the case of intimate care, or just in the case of unregulated access to me means a bear hug without any context or explanation for why we're giving this form of touch. The boundaries we set with our clients and how we show affection are critical teaching tools. We are modeling all the time. And so we need to be asking ourselves, what am I teaching in this moment with this touch? We need to break down those gestures, break down those actions, ask ourselves what we're teaching, and ask ourselves if we're reinforcing the rules that we want to be reinforcing, or if we're pulling away from them. Privacy is a mental health issue. We all need it. People like boundaries. they provide clarity. So setting boundaries is really important. Follow the rules of touch in your practice. Set that as like a personal code of conduct for yourself. And if it's not at the code of conduct in your agency, start having these conversations. Start pushing for it to be an agency-led code of conduct. And the number one rule there is no bear hugs. And the other last piece is that we often do need to think creatively to problem solve for each individual client that we have to make sure that if we are not providing the affection and the touch because we should not be, who is? And how are we making sure that they're receiving opportunities for touch and affection and intimacy, which, like we established last time, are really important and critical to people's mental health. So that brings us to the end. I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes if there's any questions or notes. I'm just going to check my email one last time, see if anybody wrote anything. Doesn't look like it. I want to thank you all for being here. Like I said at the beginning, if you want more of an expanded workshop, I know we just kind of dove in super quickly. I can come into your agency and do a 2-hour, a half day. And you can also check out the YACL Community Library. There's tons of resources there, including the Ethics of Touch workshop from Dave Hinsberger that you can borrow and look through. There's lots of reflection exercises and ways to kind of think through this. So I appreciate you all for being here. I'm just going to see one more person who's typing a note. Feel free to contact me anytime, so my information's there. If you've got a question about a particular client or a particular scenario, let me know. Sylvia and I, perfect. The next session, let me just pull it up. It's in January. And all the dates are listed on the hsyukon.com website under events. And I did want to note that we are going to be doing a webinar about supporting clients to make friends. So if that's something that you're wondering about, we are going to be doing one of those. I think it's one of the last ones. And also note, if you haven't heard about it, we are running a friendship circle in January for adults with intellectual disabilities who might need to learn some fundamentals of friendship and how to build these relationships. So we'll be meeting every Monday night and doing a lot of role play and interactive fun stuff to kind of be teaching things like reciprocity, personal hygiene, trust, humor, those kinds of things. Our next workshop is January 10th, and it's going to be kind of a Q&A format, which is the role of the support worker in managing sexuality issues. So that'll be if you're dealing with public masturbation, or a client who's hugging too much, or people who are seeking touch and affection in inappropriate ways, or you're struggling with clients who are in unhealthy relationships and you're not sure how to manage it, or you're not sure how to manage questions about relationships and sexuality from your clients. These are all things that we're going to talk about on Jan 10th. Perfect. I appreciate all your comments today, and I will see you next time. Have a great holidays. Bye.